Yeah. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along to number 9. Going to do number 9 in the public. But what I'm going to say at number 9 is there are issues relating to this update that I believe need to be discussed in 5. But we'll discuss Peter's minutes here, and anybody wants to ask him any questions or whatever they can. We'll then do 10. I'll then read out the exemption, just in case our friend Mr. Whatever Vase is watching. In full, unfortunately. I hate doing it, but I have to do it because we know he's very particular about that. And then I'm going to go back to Northern LGPS as soon as we go into 5. So as soon as you've said there's no one else listening or watching, we'll go back to Northern LGPS and we'll talk about my draft letter, which the members of the board had yesterday. I mean, how many people have we got at the moment? Because we need 4 plus me to be quorum. So we need 4 members plus me.
Got 5, haven't we?
Yeah, it's plus 5. Me. I mean, I'm happy to hang on until.
Yeah, I think we're one short, John.
Oh, hi, Jeff.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Hi, Pat.
Hi, John.
We've got Peter. We've got
Peter.
Robin.
We're all right now.
We've got Roger. We're okay. We're okay
now.
Yeah, we're okay to go. Just to say, everyone, the reason we are not meeting directly is not either myself or the officers. It was a fact that it was impossible to get a room that met the Wirral requirements on this occasion. So that's why we are remote, not because either the officers or myself have taken us back again.
Chair, sorry, just for information, because I know we normally meet at Man Island, don't we? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with Omicron, but the room we normally meet in Man Island, G40, they revised the risk assessment fairly recently, and they now holds 20. So that whether obviously hopefully that won't change, but at the moment that would be potentially okay for next year.
I noticed Pat's here. Well, welcome, Pat.
Morning, everyone. Morning.
Oh, the other.
You all.
Okay. Morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Wirral Merseyside Local Pension Board. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed at this point. I believe we're quorate, so I suggest that we move first to welcome Councillor Pat Cleary, the chair of the Wirral Pensions Committee, who is joining us today. Welcome to Councillor Cleary. Do we have any apologies?
I've not received any, Chair.
No.
We have had apologies from Stefan van Aronson.
Okay, thank you. I noticed from the attendance here that we are now definitely quorate. So we'll proceed. Item, well, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest apart from those that are usually made? No. Okay, thank you. The minutes on pages 1 to 4, as always, I will just read the page number out. Please stop me if anyone has an amendment or a query. So page 1, 2, 3, 4. We're all content. If I was sitting here, then I would sign the minutes, so you can take them as signed. Okay, then. Item 5, the audit findings report. I presume that's Donna Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. This report has been prepared by Grant Thornton following the audit of the 2020-2021 financial accounts, which also included a review of the annual report. The purpose of the report is to report to those charged with governance the key issues and audit findings of the work undertaken by Grant Thornton. Grant Thornton presented a report to committee in September, The report within the pack has been updated to reflect that further work has been completed, and this report will be presented to a future Audit and Risk Management Committee, currently scheduled for January 2022. The board will recall that at the June meeting, the Grant Thornton audit plan was presented for the audit of MPF's financial statements. The work during the summer has been in line with the plan that was presented at that meeting. This report reports their findings. The work is now substantially complete. Headlines of the report are on page 3, which is page 11 of the pack, page 13 of the PDF. The audit work was undertaken during June to October, and the findings of that work are summarised on page 4 to 16 of the Grant Thornton report. To date, Grant Thornton has identified one adjustment to the bottom line figure of the financial statements that resulted in an increase to the fund value of 135.9 million to 10.1 billion as a fund value. This is due to more up-to-date information now being available for private market assets that was not available at the time the accounts were prepared. It is common practice for pension funds to account for these types of assets using the most up-to-date valuations, adjusted for cash flows, and our accounting policy does stipulate that that is how MPF accounts for these. This normally does not present itself as a problem when more up-to-date information is known. However, for 2020-2021, which has not been a normal year on many fronts, and with the rebounds in asset values, this has resulted in the material difference this time. Grant Thornton are required to report whether, in their opinion, the financial statements give a true and fair view of the financial position of the fund, and that they've been properly prepared in accordance with prescribed guidance. The report states their work is complete and they are anticipating in giving an unqualified opinion. However, the audit does remain open until the administering authority audit is signed off. Page 18 onwards details all adjustments to the financial statements agreed. The audit fees are detailed on page 21, with the final fee of £51,249 being reported. The Grant Thornton report is presented to the board for consideration and noting. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Questions from members?
John, sorry, could I come in? I was trying to put my hand up, but I couldn't quite get my hand in time. Donna, it wasn't a question as much as just to say it's a fantastic report, and I think it's great news to know that they've done the audit and have come up with a a fantastically clean report. So it was just from my perspective, just to say thank you very much, because I think it's I think it's a fantastic result. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and it's a fund effort, so thank you. Appreciated.
And any other comments or questions? I mean, I echo what Jeff said. In fact, I said to Peter yesterday how impressive this is. And the one, correction in inverted commas you referred to, Donna, I think merely proves how robust your approach is. Because when you read through that, you realise that the adjustment's been made because you were robust in the first place. So I think it does, it shows a lot of effort by, as you say, not only yourself but your team. And I think too often in pensions accounting, we forget the accountants actually, or in pensions we think of investment and we think of pensions admin quite rightly, and I think sometimes we forget how much work goes into pensions accounting and a huge efforts. And I know this from elsewhere as well, that you and your team will be putting in. I'd just like to say, on behalf of the board, thank you. And perhaps again, we could, record our thanks to Donna and her team in the minutes, if someone's content to propose and second that, because this is, as Jeff said, an incredibly clean report, given the complexity of these accounts and what's going through here. It is, I think, unbelievably clean. So if someone wants to propose,
Chair, I'm happy to propose.
That's great.
I'll second that. Yeah,
that's great. So that's Robin and Jeff. Thank you both. Okay, can we move on, if everyone's content, to the annual report? And I think that's you again, Donna.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report provides members with copies of the Statement of Accounts report, the Letter of Representation and the Annual Report and Accounts for 2020-21, presented at Pensions Committee in September for approval in line with the statutory deadline and to be reported to a future Audit and Risk Management Committee. So the Statement of Accounts are included within Appendix 3 of the Annual Report for the Fund, and the value, as just previously noted, is 10.1 billion as at 31st of March 21. The accounts were prepared in accordance with prescribed guidance, as previously stated, and were available for audit on the 1st of July, which is in compliance and 1 month ahead of the statutory deadline. The annual report is prepared by senior officers at the fund, many of which are on this meeting today. And this was made available to the auditor during the course of their audit during the summer. In response to the Grant Thornton report, officers have agreed and adjusted to the financial statements to reflect that more up-to-date information is now available. And as previously explained, 3.6 to 3.8 of the Pensions Committee report just details other amendments that were agreed with the auditor. A letter of representation on behalf of Pensions Committee was prepared, and this provides assurances to the auditor on various aspects relating to pension fund and can be found as Appendix 2, which is page 43 of the pack. The letter will be signed by the Section 151 officer and the chair of the Audit and Risk Management Committee, following the committee that approves the financial statements of Wirral Council. Appendix 3, page 47 of the pack, is the draft annual report and accounts for the fund. There's a statutory requirement to produce an annual report for the year to the 31st of March by the 1st of December of that year, so today. The annual report contains all the reports in accordance with the regulation and is prepared by senior officers at the fund. Just to point out, the annual report does remain as a draft document whilst we await the formal approval by Audit and Risk Management Committee of Wirral Council's accounts. And then following that meeting of the approval of the accounts, the auditor will then issue their opinion. This was initially scheduled for yesterday, the 30th of November. However, there has been delays with the sign-off and audit of Wirral Council's audit, and therefore it's now scheduled to be approved at January Audit and Risk Management Committee. The annual report has been published on our website, and a copy has been sent to the LGA in accordance with the regulations. However, it is in that draft format for the reasons just explained. It's purely a technical issue around the signing of the Wirral Council's accounts. So we have put an explanation in the annual report to that effect, and explained to the LGA, and this approach has been discussed and agreed with the auditor. Again, this report is presented to board for consideration and noting. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Robin?
To the Donna and colleagues at the fund via you, Chair, I'd just like to congratulate the officers on the reference on page 64 to running costs being below peer average and the wide range of high value services. I think that's very commendable.
Thank you. I agree with that. Any other comments or thoughts?
If I just could comment, John.
Yeah,
I think again, and I think I've made this comment before, it's actually for what could be a really turgid document, it's really very readable. You know, and every part that you can make that a little bit more user friendly has been made more user friendly. So you know, I think, you know, I read an awful lot of report and accounts. So thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Jeff. Any other thoughts, comments? No, so can we approve the recommendation? Yep, okay. Move to the next item, the LGPS update, item 7, which will be Yvonne, I think.
Well, thank you, Chair. Monday night, and it focuses on the scheme and the reform of the Treasury's cost management process, which overlap and they do impact on one another. This is a complex subject matter, so it may be useful if I remind the board of some of the detail and some of the context around it. Benefit levels and employee as in member contribution rates. The national scheme valuation is totally separate process to the triannual valuation, where each fund actually calculates the funding level for the fund and sets employer contribution rates based on the membership profile for each employer. Unlike the national scheme valuation, the triannual valuation can't amend the benefit package or employees' contribution rates. So in a nutshell, one focuses on changes to the scheme which directly affects members, and the other, being the triannual valuation, affects employers' contributions to the scheme. So it's important to understand the differences between the scheme valuation and the triannual. However, to complicate matters even further, the LGPS is subject to two cost management processes for the scheme valuation. One's managed by the Treasury, and there's an LGPS specific one managed by the Scheme Advisory Board. Right, paragraph 3.2 clarifies that when the government implemented the new 2014 care scheme, the benefit package was built to align with a cost of 19.5% of pensionable pay, and this is known nationally as the target scheme cost. The Government Actuaries Department measures experience against this target scheme cost every 4 years to ensure the scheme remains affordable to employers and the taxpayer. Any changes in the target cost are shared between members and employers. Employers bear the cost The original result of the 2016 SAB scheme valuation process saw a reduction in cost of the scheme by 0.9% of pay, and a number of benefit improvements were agreed, increasing employer costs by an equivalent amount. This was back in 2017-18. However, the process was paused due to the Mcleod judgment, but following the ministerial statement earlier this year by Luke Hall, that outlined the details of the remedy, and the process was restarted. Since then, the government has confirmed that the Mcleod costs will fall to members, increasing the scheme cost to 19.4% against the target cost of 19.5% to pay. Despite this slight shortfall, Scheme Advisory Board won't be recommending any scheme changes as part of the 2016 cost management process, but they do plan to revisit the Tier 3 ill health provisions and the contribution rates for the lowest paid members at a future date, but not part of this process. Despite exercising its legislative duty to complete the process, the Scheme Advisory Board is concerned that the Mcleod costs have been allocated as a member cost. And also the Fire Brigade Union has also instigated a judicial review against the decision. We don't expect to hear anything around that until probably mid next year. Right, the other connected topic within the report, starting at paragraph 3.10 of the committee report, relates to Treasury's review of its cost control process. This review was undertaken as the mechanism is deemed to be not to be operating in line with its original objective, as it was only supposed to be triggered by extraordinary events and not following the first round of the process. Proceeds with the three reforms, namely which are listed in paragraph 3.12 of the report. You will note under the financial implications at section 4 that the government actuary's analysis of the reform mechanism that's only expected to breach about once every 40 years. As such, cost breaches will be less frequent but more material when they do occur, providing reduced cost control, but obviously members' benefits are going to be more stable over that period if it comes to pass. That's an overview of the issues. We're happy to take any questions from anybody over this subject. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Yvonne. Any questions or comments from members? Could I say two things, Yvonne? First of all, thank you for explaining very clearly as you did the difference between the cost control valuation and the local valuations. Because in recent times I've read, a number of documents and explanations of what's been going on. And the only way you can understand them is if you've been involved right back to the beginning. And lots of people won't have been across the whole LGPS. And I think commonly it's assumed they have been. And I think what you just explained will cover for anyone who hasn't been here from the very beginning. I know most of us have been, but one or two people perhaps haven't, what the differences are. And I thank you for that, because I think that was crucial. The second thing is this issue of Mcleod Costs. I completely agree that Mcleod Costs are not member costs. Members should not have to bear Mcleod Costs, in my view, because they didn't create it, but neither did employers. They didn't create it. The people who created this problem were Her Majesty's government. And if anybody should be paying for this, it's central government by some sort of subsidy or input to the LGPS, because it wasn't the employees or employers who were involved in actually determining the scheme ultimately. They were involved in the discussions, but it was the government that set the scheme down. It was the government that failed to notice that the scheme was legally defective. And I do not see why either employees or employers should have to bear that cost. That's just my thought. And I think it's unfortunate that either employers or employees should have to bear that cost. And it's further unfortunate that the benefits from the valuation, the scheme valuation which have been put into abeyance, would have helped and aided, people on the lowest pay with the least favourable conditions in the LGPS. And because of a government failure, their failure to understand legality and illegality, some of the most or least well-paid people, part-time people, have lost extra benefits, and I think that's very sad. Personally, it's just my thought.
I agree. Right at the beginning of the process to design the target cost, the underpin actually was included. The actual underpin was included in the cost control mechanism. But now, if you look at where the reform now of the cost control mechanism, they are actually going to exclude anything from the legacy scheme. So it doesn't make sense now to actually have the Mcleod cost in there, because then the reform of the cost control is saying you need to remove anything around legacy schemes. So it doesn't make sense. I agree with you, John.
Chair, if I may, a couple of comments. I'd like to echo your appreciation of Donna's summary. I mean, it's a few years since I actually read the original documentation. It was extremely helpful. We actually anticipated an answer to a couple of my questions, Yvonne. Thank you. The second thing, Chair, I share your sensitivity to the suggestion of cost implications for members. I know we are in a very different place to the university superannuation scheme, who are heavily in deficit, but there's clearly a high level of employee sensitivity to any increase in member contributions there.
Yeah, absolutely, Robin. I mean, the whole point of the scheme, which is very well run, which is highly funded, has been to sort of try and improve. I thought the aims of the cost mechanism would be to try and improve the benefits for low-paid part-time employees, and anything that came out of that would assist them. And something did come out. The Scheme Advisory Board had some very, very sensible suggestions, particularly for people who don't pay tax, who are going to, I think, particularly benefit. And these again will be part-time, low-paid workers, and they've lost out because somewhere in the government or the civil service, somebody failed to realise a basic legal fact that age discrimination was illegal under the, I think, 2010 Equalities Act. Why they never spotted this when they put the scheme together, I don't think any of us know. And I think it's very unfortunate that, as is often the case, the people who are least able to, afford it have to pay the penalties of others. But that's just my view.
Yeah. Also, under 6.2, SAB have gone back to the government, and they're asking for them to meet the cost of the administration because obviously this is going to cost a huge amount of
Absolutely.
money in administration. So they've gone back to ask for, you know, money around changing the administration systems, which I understand the Home Office have done for the fire brigade pension scheme. So I think they've obviously thought, well, you know, fire brigade fire schemes are getting the money back from the government, so they're looking to get that same compensation for LGPS. So let's see if that happens.
Well, that should happen, I think, again, because if there's an extra cost on the LGPS, it can only come from two places: either investment returns, which will be whatever that day will be, or employer contributions. And we all know that if employer contributions go up, services are cut. Now, most, not all, but most of the LGPS employer contributions come from councils. Most council spending, and Donna Ridland will be able to speak far better on this than I can, is spent on adult and children's social care for the most vulnerable people in society. So if it is passed back to the scheme, the cost of admin, i.e. to employers, the most vulnerable in society are going to pay yet again for a mess up of central government, which I think again is completely wrong, and that's why, as you say, they should pay for it. But anyway, Donna's put her hand up, so Donna.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, can you? Oh, great. Sorry, I don't know what's wrong with the camera, but even my phone wasn't working yesterday. But I was just going to ask Yvonne, is there any indication of the timeline when this is going to be resolved and, you know, everything implemented?
Yeah, it's expected that we should be getting the draft regulations sometime in the spring of 2022. With the regulations, I don't think the actual regulations will come to effect until October 2023, but they'll be backdated to the 1st of April. So we're just waiting for the draft regulation. We're waiting for the full ministerial statement because we haven't had the full response on Mcleod. Has the unfunded schemes have had their responses, but we're still waiting for ours. And with that, it should come the draft regulations, but they're expected in spring next year with an implementation date from October 2023.
All right, thank you. And I suppose this is going to put a lot of time on the team again.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right, Donna. We are actually working because we've seen the ministerial statement, so we've got an idea of what's coming out of it. And it's not really, it's very much aligned to the consultation that came out in July 2020. So we are at the moment doing preparations around the data. So we are working to go back to all employers to make sure that our data is clean in preparation for the regulations coming out. So we are working at the moment, preparing for it.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks, John. I echo what you said before, so I won't repeat that. I just think, Yvonne, it might be worthwhile that we actually record the time that it's taking us to do all this extra admin work on this. And you know, not a massive exercise, but at least we've got some indication then of the cost of this, so that if it ever comes back, we can say, you know, the consequences of this have not been insignificant to us as a fund in administration terms, and can highlight that and say, you know, this is the actual cost of this decision that was made by government some years ago.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Jeff, because the benefits to members are going to are going to be less than the cost that's going to create for the administration, because the care scheme is a better scheme for most individuals. It's actually not going to be financially benefit for most in the LGPS, but the admin costs are far going to outreach what the benefits are to the members.
Yeah.
So I presume, Yvonne, the Scheme Advisory Board is trying to indicate to government that, you know, they should be taking on the admin costs, not the employers, because it's not an employer problem. It's not a member problem. It's a government problem.
You're absolutely right. They are trying to highlight to the government, but let's see what materialises. Hopeful, because the Home Office have done it for the fire scheme, but we're paying for the admin software, so hopefully Leveller Up will take the same approach.
Let's hope so. Donna, you got another question?
Yeah, I'm just going to say, I don't know if it's the same for the Wirral Pension Fund, but you know, in local government, if government legislation does mean that you have got additional costs. There's usually is it additional burdens grant you could apply for, and I don't know whether it counts here. It's like Jeff said, you collect the costs and you can evidence that. You might be able to recoup them.
Yeah, hopefully that'll be done. That should be done at a national level and driven by LGA. But yeah, exactly, right. You're absolutely right. It's between you and Jeff to say we need to be earmarking them costs what we're paying out at this point in time, the resource cost for future. If there is any opportunity to recoup them, we need to recoup the costs. We need to be prepared to know what them costs are. So that's a good suggestion.
Sorry, Yvonne, just could I just any hint of a timescale for revisiting tier 3 then?
I haven't got no. They just said they are going to come back and review that, because that was one of the changes, one of the measures that was suggested before the scheme process was halted because of Mcleod. That was one of the measures to say we need to look at removing tier 3, along with the others around the death grants and the lower contribution rates for lower paid members. So hopefully, because I would really welcome that change, because tier 3 is an absolute administrative nightmare to administer. To be fair, 75% of ill health retirements go down the tier 1 route anyhow, and I think it's 13% are down tier 2, and there's only 12% for tier 3. But that 12% creates so much problems around IDRPs, and I would be really welcome that tier 3 to be gone, because I don't think it's that much of a cost to think. Obviously it was in the 0.9% to get rid of tier 3, and obviously people will get a tier 2 then. It stops all the appeals. I'd really welcome that. So hopefully it'll be, I don't know, they haven't basically told us when it will be. They just said they're going to revisit it, but not part of the scheme advisory board process. But things are coming out really slow from central government. So maybe in the next 12 months.
Yeah, I hope so. We're dealing with a tier 3 in our organisation. You're right, it is a nightmare basically, because there's not, people are just going to appeal against tier 3 every time.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what happens. And then it's all the administration burden of the 18-month reviews. You've got to do an 18-month review. Employers have to make sure that they haven't gained gainful employment. They're not capable of obtaining gainful employment. There's the 18-month reviews. It's just a nightmare to administer for a 3-year temporary benefit. And most of them actually at 18-month review get uplifted to tier 2 anyhow, or we go through the appeals and go to a tier 2. So lots and lots of admin.
Yeah.
Great if we get rid of them.
Sorry, Yvonne, just while you're on as well, any movement on the exit cap?
No, nothing at all. What I understand with the exit cap is that when the regulations were introduced last year by Treasury, they were overridden. I don't think that's going to happen. I think each department are going to set their own regulations, and there'll be separate consultations. So the LGPS consultation that happened, it'll be scrapped and they'll do a new set of provisions. So there'll be no overriding legislation from the Treasury that department's legislation has to align in with. But we've just had a new local government minister, so I don't know what her focus is, and the Treasury's moved away from it, so I don't know what her focus is going to be on that. So no overriding from Treasury.
Well,
hopefully when it comes in, it'll work then, because the regulations don't have to align. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Yvonne. Thank you.
Any more observations or comments? Okay, thanks for that, Yvonne. I mean, if you can, do whatever you can in discussions you have with other admin managers, or if Peter can. I know Peter's on the scheme advisory, one of the committees of the scheme advisory board. If any way you can feed this into anywhere you can, the idea that
yeah, well, that's
representations are made to government, because
we are part of the, sorry to interrupt you, we are part of a METS group, and LGA do take part of it now. So we do actually, we have a sort of feedback to Jeff Houston at the moment, so hopefully he'll take our comments back to government.
Well, if the METS group can push that, please do, because I think Donna Midland's absolutely right. This should be a burdens grant issue, not an employer issue. Okay, thanks for that, Yvonne, very much. Thank you. Next one is the updated investment strategy statement. I think we're back to Peter now.
Members that pension funds have two important strategies. We have the funding strategy statement, which derives from the LGPS administration regulations. And then we have the investment strategy statement, which derives from the LGPS investment regulations. And it's the ISS that we have revised. And there's a report. I'll just draw members' attention to the cover report. Section 3.2 reminds members that guidance issued by what was MHCLG states that in formulating and maintaining their policy on social, environmental and corporate governance factors, an administering authority should explain the extent to which the views of their local pension board and other interested parties who they consider may have an interest will be taken into account. So that's why we have undertaken a consultation with members of the board prior to this meeting, and thank you for the responses that we received. So moving on to the report, which is page 154 of the pack, which was taken to Pensions Committee earlier this week. Under section 1.2, there's reference to the regulation in the LGPS, which requires the publication of an ISS. And then under section 3.1, in September, we took the revised Northern LGPS responsible investment policy to committee for approval. And that underpins the ESG element of the investment strategy statement. So as well as revising it to reflect changes in that, we also revised it to reflect changes in guidance, changes as a result of the Supreme Court ruling, and changes in best practice and around the stewardship code and so on. So section 3.2 and 3.3 set out the things that are required to be contained in an investment strategy statement. And as you will have read through the investment strategy statement, which is the appendix to the report, you'll see that we've structured it consistently with those requirements. So hopefully it's fairly logical the way in which we've set out the investment strategy statement. As I say, section 3.6 of the report sets out the things that we have revised in the strategy. The other thing that the report sets out under section 3.8, it says 8.8, is enhanced reporting and monitoring in relation to ESG issues, so that we are already bringing a number of reports to Pensions Committee via the Investment Monitoring Working Party, and we're enhancing that reporting and making it publicly available so that members of the scheme, stakeholders of the scheme, can see the issues that are being addressed and the ways in which they're being addressed. As I say, under section 4, the investment strategy statement is very fundamental to the management both of the assets and liabilities of the scheme, and it's intended to set out some high-level overriding principles that are then developed in some of the underlying policies, such as the Northern LGPS RI policy. So I've gone through that fairly quickly, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions or observations from members? Donna.
Yeah, just to say thanks, Peter, for sharing the report early, because when you get a big pack of papers, you can't read it as well. So I really appreciate it. No, we're just having a bit of time, bit more time to read that, because it is very complex, and it showed me that how little I know about investment. But you know, I did understand some of it, but I did appreciate the early read of it. Thank you.
Could it take? Sorry, Peter.
Sorry, just before, can I just say thank you for those comments, Donna, and in a sense to apologise to the board that we did run a workshop for Pensions Committee particularly, and belatedly I issued an invitation to the board. I recognise that most of you weren't able to, one or two of you did, which was really appreciated. So we'll try and avoid that happening in future and give board members a bit more notice of these things so that you're able to attend. And that was an opportunity to go into a bit more detail around some of the specifics of the statement. Sorry, Chair.
No, thank you, Peter. I've got two hands. Could I take Jeff first and then Councillor Cleary afterwards, given that Pat may have something more broad to say. So, Jeff, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Peter, just on the strategic asset structure, which gives us the guidance in terms of the range of investments within various classes. Who gave us advice in terms of whether that range is correct, the correct range to have, and is that flexible to reflect the maturity of the fund? So, because obviously the fund matures gradually, does that give us that enough flexibility in terms of how we need to operate?
Yes, I'm interested you pick up that point, because we are at a transition stage at the moment where we get advice from our strategic investment consultants who are Aon. So they've been involved with the conversation both with our independent advisors and officers of the fund around transitioning the fund to reflect its maturity. So we are increasingly mature. We're one of the more mature local government schemes, and the biggest risk in the fund is our equity risk. So the advice is that we need to reduce that equity risk and diversify further into alternatives. That does bring other challenges in terms of higher costs and so on, but it should help reduce the volatility of the fund. But clearly over the last couple of years, equities have been a very strongly performing asset class. So we've been trying to manage that process, and it is still an ongoing process in terms of de-risking the overall fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Peter. Councillor Pat Cleary.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to say a few things really about from the committee's point of view, the process that officers have gone through to kind of engage with us and inform us around this. We did have a specific session of the Investment Monitoring Working Party devoted to responsible investment, and then as Peter mentioned, we had a specific workshop on the ISS where all the committee members could get to grips with it, have it explained to them and question it. And I think the fact that apart from consulting directly with the pension board members, the fact that pension board members now have the opportunity to attend the Investment Monitoring Working Party is a really positive thing from my point of view. And just to echo what Peter said, and I think the new document has some significant changes and improvements, and I'm particularly pleased again what Peter mentioned about the enhanced reporting of responsible investment issues. I think a lot of members felt that it was important that the public and members of the scheme could see more detail if they wish to about the work that's going on around responsible investment, and that will be coming forward through committee papers in due course. So it was, I suppose thank Peter and the officers for all the work they did in engaging with members of the committee, and I think the fruits of that are there to see in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Cleary. Could I just sort of respond to what Councillor Pat Cleary said? I think the fact that pension board members have now been invited, an open invitation to the Investment Management Working Party, I think absolutely underlines what's happened from the start of this pension board. We've been fully engaged with the fund from the start. We've never been treated as an adjunct, and this has been a sort of final building block in everything that's happened, that we were fully invited to those meetings, which I think is probably, I can't speak for the pension boards, but I suspect it's probably almost unique, possibly unique, the amount of involvement that the pension board have been given into this process. And I think it says much for the approach of the administrative authority. In fact, it says huge amounts for the approach of both the elected members and the officers of the administrative authority towards the pension board. That we're not here, with some sort of minor role on the edge because the regs say we have to be here. We're here because the Administrative Authority wants us involved and has welcomed our involvement. And I know that at that particular meeting that you had about the investment strategy statement, one of our members at least was there, and I know did contribute positively because I've heard that. So I'd just like to thank the Administrative Authority for that on behalf of the board. And I know that a number of members of the board have attended and do attend those meetings, and I'd commend everyone for that. Has anyone else got any thoughts or observations on the ISS? The only thing I would say is just to perhaps add a little to what Peter said about the FSS and the ISS. Now, I'd say that those obviously are the two really important ones, plus the admin strategy. When it comes to those three strategies, we will try to involve the pension board directly in the consultation before it goes anywhere, but within the remit that we do not delay anything. So like we did with the ISS, Peter consulted me as he needs to under the terms of reference, but he also consulted the board. We'll try and do that for the really big strategies in the future so that board members are consulted as individuals as well as through their organisations. Roger.
Thanks, Jay. Just to reiterate, I was able to attend that joint meeting, the workshop, and it was really useful, I thought. And it was nice just to take up your point, John, to be able to interact with some of the pension committee members as well. I thought it was a really good event, actually. So I look forward to that. And once we get the dates for next year, attending some of the investment working party meetings as well. Just thanks for that.
Thanks, Roger. I think everyone echoes what you say. Are we content now to agree the recommendation? Okay. I think the next one is the Northern LGPS update. Back to Peter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report provides members effectively on this occasion with minutes of the last joint committee meeting. I'm not proposing to go through those minutes in any detail, other than to comment that responsible investment is a standing item on that agenda and does receive a fair amount of attention at the joint committee meeting, as it does at the working parties of Merseyside.
Has anyone got any observations or comments? I've just got one, Peter, on page 180. I think it's very positive that the Northern LGPS is leading and making positive efforts in relation to social issues and human rights issues, and working with LAP to sort of highlight these, because these are crucial issues. They do affect investment returns, the way that people are treated, and we shouldn't be making profits at other people's expense. And I think it's very positive to note on page 180 that the comments there regarding that particular issue. Anyone else, any observations or comments? I'd just like to say one thing at this point. I do have something regarding these minutes to say, but I believe that in my own view, and I've discussed it with the Director of Pensions, that this would be exempt under Schedule 12A of the 72 Act on the basis it relates to the affairs of a particular body or person. So I do intend to come back to this issue when we go in the exempt. Okay, are we content to move on and note the report as per the recommendations? Okay. Minutes of the working party on page 183. Peter again.
Yes, again, minutes of the working party. This was the working party that was devoted to responsible investment issues. We had a number of external speakers and we've had some favourable feedback, so thank you for that.
Any observations or questions on the minutes?
And I should also mention the governance and risk working party minutes are there, which just indicate that, again, the governance and risk working party look at some of the administration matters such as pension board do. So, for example, the admin KPI report goes to the governance and risk working party because I think it's a valuable report that the board has commissioned, and its information is very helpful for elected members as well.
Thank you, Peter. Can we note the report? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we come to item 11. I'm required to read this declaration for legal reasons, so I will read the declaration. Please bear with me on this one. So, exempt information, exclusion of members of the public. Following items contain exempt information. This is items 12, 13 and 14, and also we've agreed part of item 9 as well to be further discussed. So the recommendation is that under section 100 brackets A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items, which I've just named, of business on the grounds that they involve the likely discussion of exempt information as defined by the relevant paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12